such an honor to be here. So a little bit of background. What happened is I read this book, Creating a Life That Matters, from cover to cover. I couldn't put it down. And I messaged your son. I loved it. I couldn't put it down. I had one problem. I felt like Rabbi Friedman was talking to me in this book. I mean, we had a conversation, but it was one-sided. I wanted to talk back. I wanted to ask questions. I wanted to give feedback. And that's my only complaint. Otherwise, I really loved it. And he said, well, I could arrange that for you. We can have a conversation. And the way I thought of it was like, I remember when I was in seminary, Mrs. Chitrick did this little experiment on us. She gave us a paper with an entire story that you could spit back at her, but not understand a word of it you're reading. Like, for example, it could say, the blarf bleaked over the treeked and ate a pleek. And she asked questions we were able to answer, like, who bleaked over the leaked? And we were able to say the eek. I mean, there was all these words that you could spit back, and what did he eat and what did he jump over? But you didn't understand a word what you're saying. And that's what I kind of felt like when I read this book, that words that I probably could have answered and concepts that I probably could have explained previously. I could have said exactly who was doing what, but it wasn't my language. And I really felt that this book was my language. It spoke English. It spoke the language of the Nefesh Bahamas. It spoke the language of logic. It made so much sense. But at the same time, it really challenged a lot of things that we hear in the world, or, I just had some questions. So that's the intro to this conversation.
Okay. Let me try a different lighting here a second. Okay, I see better now.
Okay.
So give me an example. What did you find so interesting?
So interesting, I loved the way you had such a balance when it comes to kids, that on the one hand, we're totally inflexible when it comes to what Torah says. What Torah says, 100%. We have no right to compromise on anything that God says he wants. And at the same time, we get to be flexible by understanding where our kids are up to. Like it almost sounded like a contradiction. And I was like, that's so interesting. It really spoke to me. And I also love the part where you said that babies should never cry. Giving the baby the security. I just, so beautiful. I read that page a few times. Just, babies used to be raised by communities, and it's our job. Infants need to be taken care of. But the question I had in the kids section, my first question, is you said something about choices, not giving kids choices because it confuses them and it's misleading them. And for me, that was it was perplexing, because to me, choices is like the tip that you pull out of your hat to get the kid to do something. Because instead of saying, hey, do you want to take a bath? You say, hey, do you want the blue towel or the yellow towel? And the truth is it works. So why not? Why not give kids choices? And what else can you do to encourage cooperation?
If a kid happens to say, can I have the blue towel? Sure. But to constantly give the impression that you have the choice, you have the opinion, you have the say, when you're not really saying that. That's what I say, and I think it's in the book. You ask the child, you want the blue towel or the orange towel? The kid says, I want the yellow towel. You say, no, blue or orange. So what are you doing? What are you doing?
But it kind of like helps them comply, like it works.
But in the long run, yeah, it works in the short term, which is always the danger. A threat also works short term. So the question is, what in overall view of life, what are you telling the child?
Mm-hmm.
You're trying to give the impression that the child has freedom of choice, but only the choices you give. So it's kind of a strange, non-real scenario. It's choice, but it's not really choice.
It's interesting. You added the no threats I don't remember reading that. Can you elaborate? Why not threaten a kid?
Or even spanking, or it works. Wow. Makes your job so much easier. But in the long run, you're going to get a reaction and a rebellion and resentment.
So what do? You call the kid in for homework, for supper, for bedtime, for bath time. The kid says no.
That shouldn't happen. That's the whole point. The whole point is that children need consistency. They thrive on consistency. And when a child starts to resist you, something's already wrong. Sure, you can get around it by playing nice and by, but what is the issue? Why is there resistance in the first place? And that's where obedience, there's a whole section there on. Obedience is absolutely essential for a child's sanity. If he can't obey, then he can't function. That's real life, true to life. Question is, what exactly do we mean by obedience? Do we mean dumb the kid down so that he doesn't have to think for himself? Because you're going to make all the decisions and the child is just going to obey? That's not what we mean. We don't want a child that doesn't think. God forbid.
Right.
What we want is a child who is empowered to obey. Because laziness, willfulness, spitefulness, all work to make the child resist. A child who can get past all of that is empowered to obey. That gives the child strength of character, true confidence in themselves, not arrogance or bluster. That's a healthy child.
So how do you get that? If something is already amiss, like you said, and they're knowing, how do you restore a child?
Well, the best thing to do is to do some catch up. What you would have said or would have told the child a year ago, tell him now. Now you can say it even in more intelligent terms because he's a little bit older. So you say to a child, a soldier obeys, not because he's brainless. That would not make a good soldier. A soldier obeys because he can. He can because little things won't stop him, little things won't discourage him, little things won't frighten him. So he is capable of obeying where the non-soldier is simply not capable. So the non-soldier who doesn't obey orders is not because he's thinking for himself. It's because he's trapped within himself.
How capable are children of not being trapped by themselves?
Amazing. Amazing. And we see it all the time. You see a child who I can't. And then all of a sudden you give him a little bit of motivation. Yes, he can.
So what's wrong with the motivation then? External.
That's like these trained animal acts. Every time the animal does what it's supposed to, you feed him some goodie. So you have to keep giving him the sugar or whatever it is, the reward on the spot, because that's the only motivation they have. So again, in the short term, it works. But what is your long-term message? Don't ever do anything that doesn't have an immediate reward. If there's no lollipop waiting, don't do it. On the contrary, you want to show a child by offering a lollipop what the child is capable of so that you don't need the lollipop next time around. But you don't want a kid to get addicted to lollipops, because there's an adult version of that too.
Yeah. I'm still trying to understand it though, because at what point do you stop? Is there an age you stop, a stage you stop? How do you gauge when you're giving that lollipop to show them what they're capable of versus weaning them off it?
Depends on the maturity of the child. It's totally unpredictable.
So you have to just be in tune with your own child.
Yeah. Now there you got the solution to most of your problems. If you're
sorry, what were you saying?
The real solution is to be in tune with your child.
Do you think that all parents are naturally wired and have this ability to be in tune with their children?
I think we're naturally wired to repeat what we experienced. The way we were raised, that's how we're going to raise our children. We don't want to do that. So we consult with books and with writers and with advisors and we start raising children with some very foreign concepts. And it becomes a little awkward. And the child feels like he's being raised by a book instead of a mother. It feels like a classroom rather than a home. So what works in the classroom, and it's fine for the classroom because keeping discipline is requirement number one, because you got 30 kids in the room. It's not the same as raising a child. But much of the advice that parents are given comes from the experiences of teachers and kindergarten monitors, what works for them. It doesn't always apply at home. It's a different task. It's a different mission.
Right. I had a hard time with something else. The whole difference between the police officer versus the sergeant. And it struck me as almost like, and maybe when you answer me, you could say it again so that the listeners can understand what I'm talking about. But it struck me as almost being like so critical to be like a sergeant who's trying to I was like envisioning it like a little army, say the bracha better, no better, no better. Like what happened to finding the positive and complimenting them and bringing that out so that they want to do more of that?
Yeah, well, I was comparing it to a sergeant in terms of what he disciplines, not the way he disciplines. You don't use the barking tone of a sergeant, obviously. I don't know why the sergeants use it either, but okay.
No, but even on focusing what needs to be better rather than bringing out and focusing on what they're doing already well.
No, what they're doing, but not well.
So why? Why would you focus on what they're doing, but not well, rather than clean what they're doing? Give them credit.
Yeah.
But otherwise, it feels like I'm never going to be good enough because no matter what I do, you're going to find something wrong with
it. In practical things and simple things, if a child is riding a bicycle and you see them doing something that isn't the best for maintaining the balance or for being safe or whatever, and you tell them, it'll work better if you pedal this way or you hold the handlebar this way, the child doesn't resent it. You show a child how to swing a bat, how to climb a rope ladder, they never resent it. Because you're working with them and not against them. Whereas when you discipline a child for misbehaving, now there's a clash. You're telling the child that he's wrong. Child becomes a little bit defensive. So you're the attacker and he's the defender. That could go very bad. But when you're on the same page, he wants to ride the bicycle and you're helping him ride it better. There's no clash here. There's no insult. There's no rejection. Unless you're impatient and you're condemning his inability or his failure, which is, of course, not the point. The point is, if you're doing something, do it right. And all the examples of the stories of the previous Rebbe as a child, in almost every story, you see it that way. It's good behavior, but here's how you do it right.
And in your experience, if it's done obviously patiently, not barked out, a child could appreciate that, like you're on the same team. Like you don't get the feeling of like, you be happy at least I'm mumbling some words. You want me to say it better? You don't think a child wants to just be appreciated for what they do?
No, no. I don't think a child needs constant compliments, but attention is a compliment. You're paying attention, you noticed what the child did, you care that the child do it better. That's, in a sense, that is a compliment. You know, without the cheap part of it. So constantly telling a child, oh, you're the greatest, you're the cutest, you're the best, you're so smart, you're so... Eventually the child stops believing you. Because children are not stupid. It gets a little thin. Mm-hmm. Again and again, and yeah, sure. That's what mothers always say. But paying attention never grows old, and it never grows thin. Oh, what, you paying attention to me again? Yeah. That never grows old. And the same thing is the other concept about criticizing a child the next day, not the same day. Because again, you've been thinking about me all this time? You remembered what I did yesterday or 2 days ago? There's a compliment in that somewhere, but it's a healthy kind of compliment.
Is that what goes on in a child's mind? Like, to me, maybe an adult could think that way, but in their little world, do they really take it that way?
Look, a child can be made to feel completely insignificant, unimportant, unnecessary, and somewhat of an annoyance. Like, how many times do I have to tell you, oh, so raising me is a burden that you resent? Thank you very much. I don't know if a child consciously thinks that, but it certainly leaves that impression. So we got to be careful not to ever suggest that unintentionally. On the contrary, I'm paying attention, I notice, I remember, I bother to bring it up. That is so empowering. That makes the child feel significant, which is a lot better than feeling like an unnecessary annoyance.
Right. You know, there was another thing that I was wondering about. You mentioned about almost like identifying with the child when you are telling them something that they're doing or that they could improve, not making them feel almost like other, like how could you? And it reminded me of the story. I think of the Mitzvah Rabbi, who before he was able to help the chassid, he had to find it, the dakas inside him. You know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
So I read it. It reminded me of that story. And then I was like, yeah, but how? Like what? What does that look like? Is this just in the mind? Do I say something to the child? Is it just changing how I look at them?
Well, it's like you're so disappointed in the child's childishness. You're such a baby. You realize that you are too. In your own way, You're such a baby. So when you say to the child, don't be a baby, don't forget to include yourself. When you say, be a little more thoughtful, be a little more responsible, be a little more selfless. What, and you don't have to? So it's not like the child is an alien and needs to be taught things that no one on earth ever. It's the same things. It comes in child size, and it comes in adult size, but it's the same thing. And when you do that, it sounds more, I don't know, more sympathetic.
So it's an internal thing. You're not saying anything out loud. In your mind, you're identifying so that when it comes out, your child feels like you relate, like you understand.
That you're not distancing yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You're not saying, I'm an adult and you're an idiot. I'm important and you're an annoyance. That's terrible. But when you think, we're suffering from the same thing. I need to grow up. You need to grow up. So let me help you. Then it's a different tone. It's a different feel. And
I love how you just said that. We're suffering from the same thing. I need to grow up. You need to grow up. We're basically raising ourselves and our children simultaneously.
Yeah. So the Rebbe Rashab said, when the Rebbetzin said he's only a child, and the Rebbe Rashab said, a child very soon becomes an adult. And when you become an adult, that's when you realize what a child you are. So don't make that great distance. The child is not that different from you, and the child's needs are not that different than your own, and the child's weaknesses are not that different from your own. It's a human condition.
But never tell them, right? You need to be on your pedestal. That's from another part. Yeah. So I had a question also on another part. You were speaking all the way at the end. I think it's one of the last parts of the book where it talks about how, from the Torah's perspective, our job is to create happy children, and that unhappy is unacceptable. And it just struck me as, what about if something that's making them unhappy is like out of our control? Like, what does it mean unhappy is unacceptable? Something's making them unhappy, right? First of all, how much control do we have? Like, what can we do if our child is perpetually unhappy? And also, since when is happiness such an end goal? Like, I thought we were always told you have to do things regardless if you're happy or not. So I'm just wondering about both of those pieces. First of all, on its centrality and importance. Second of all, assuming it is so important, how do you get there?
Of course, you can't control everything. And external things, external to the family, can make a child unhappy. But then you got to fix it. At home, there's only happiness. I'll break it down a little bit. Sitting at a table, anytime, dinner, Shabbos, Yontif, the child should never feel uncomfortable or unsafe sitting at the table. This is not a time for criticizing. It's not a time for ridiculing. It's not a time for rejection, for discipline. Not at the table. The table must be the safe space.
And what happens when they start fighting or throwing or making noise or drama or doing what kids do?
It's got to remain safe. So when there's a need for disciplining or criticizing, it shouldn't be at the table. Aside from, you have to know how to criticize, but at the table, never.
Care to share how to criticize?
No, just like in public. You never criticize or discipline your kid in public. Mm-hmm. It's too shaming. It's too embarrassing. So there are times for criticism or for disciplining, and there are times when you do not. You don't want the child to feel any discomfort associated with sitting at the table with you. That's when you're family, when you're nurturing, when everything is safe. That's at the very least. At the very least, the family meal should be absolutely safe, comfortable, and inviting.
Is that what you meant by happy? Just the environment, not necessarily controlling something that happened in the family or to the child, etc.
Again, if the child is unhappy about something, the family, the home should heal it, should compensate for it, because it certainly shouldn't be coming from the home. It's never the home that's making the child unhappy. Because then what hope does the child have? There's an interesting phenomenon in the healing arts. There are children, even adults, if you console them, they hate you. They resent it. Tell them, it's not so serious, you'll be fine. They hate it. This is called aggravation from consolation. So some people, no matter how upset they are, if you make nice and you tell them it's good and you give them a hug, everything's fine. But then there are those who, if you try to be nice and give them a hug when they're upset, they get more upset. Consoling backfires. And usually that happens to people whose misery or unhappiness comes from the family. In other words, those who should be giving him comfort are causing him pain. So now if you come along and try to give him comfort, you're aggravating, because the people who give comfort are the ones who are hurting me. So comforting is now associated with pain. That's why you have to be really careful when you say to a child, it's nothing. Don't be upset, it's nothing. So now anytime somebody tries to reason and say, it's not so serious, you're the enemy. Don't say it's nothing. Because you can imagine what that feels like. I'm in pain.
This is what I find so interesting. It's like you have this compassionate approach of not saying it's nothing, and at the same time raising the kid to, I don't want to say get over it, but get beyond it, grow. I love it.
You're raising the kid for the kid to say it's nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Now you got a good kid.
Mm-hmm. I also loved where you touched slightly on this idea of self-care, that really genuine self-development means stepping out of yourself, beyond yourself, not getting more into yourself. And that if it distracts you from the question of what can I do for God, it's poison. That line just jumped out at me, where on the one hand, you weren't saying neglect yourself, right? I think you said small doses, take care of yourself, right? Eat, sleep, but that our goal is self-transcendence. And I wanted to hear ideas. How can we inculcate this idea? People say that today idealism is dead. Do you agree? How can we inspire idealism? And
It is certainly not dead. And in most cases, it is the solution to all the problems. Kids suffering, misery, failure, the rejection, but you give them a responsibility and he can do something noble, it heals everything. All of a sudden, life is good. So it's not dead, not by any measure. We do it all the time, actually. You say to a child, a very young child, you say, it's bedtime, time to go to sleep. The kid says, no, I don't want it. What do you say? But it's bedtime. What are you doing? What are you telling the child? Too bad? I don't care what you want. It's time to go to sleep. No, you're saying you don't want to, but you know what that means? That means there's something besides what you want. Isn't that the message? You want to or you don't want to, yeah, that's an issue. But see, that's the clincher. But I know you want to take this toy home, but it's not ours. It's not yours. So what is that but? It means you got to consider another reality besides yours. So you're angry, but you're not allowed to hit. Yeah, but I was angry. Yes, but you're not allowed. So you're weaning the child away from the me monster. So we're doing it all the time. Just watch your tone. Just say it as an instruction, as a chinuch, not as a frustration.
How about in the older age, teenagers?
Even more so.
How do you go about being mechanic, this concept of basically you'll be happiest if you get over yourself? Convince them of it?
I read an interesting article. There was this guy who was kind of drifting away from his parents' traditions. And his family was Hasidic, and he wore streimel, and they wore the whole. He didn't want. One year on Purim, he put on the streimel, and his father said to him, "So that's it. The streimel is now a Purim costume for you." That's it. It turned him around. Completely changed him. What is that saying? That's it? So this is now your reality? Sobered him up. It wasn't condemning, it wasn't mocking, it was, this is what you want? This is the new you? And the kid said, oh. Sobered him up. So when you say to a child who's rebelling or is upset, so what is your point? So what do you want to do? Destroy yourself? That's the but. I understand you're angry, you're frustrated, you're rebelling, but where are you going? So what's your plan? There's a but. This boy says, I'm not interested. The Torah is not for me. Torah is not for me? You want to steal and kill? No. You want to marry out? No. You want to eat chazer? No. I said, so what did you just say? Torah is not for me. But some of it is. So reword your objections to make sense.
Well, he's saying that he doesn't want to kill, but not necessarily because Torah says not to, because he doesn't think it's a moral thing to do.
No, but he's saying Torah is not for me. I can't live like this.
Oh, then you can't. Okay, got it. I misunderstood before.
So emotions are irrational, unreasonable, extreme, fanatical. The mind comes up with the but. Yeah, that's what you're feeling, but think for a minute. That changes everything. So you bring a little seichel to the middays, that results in menschlichkeit.
Yeah, but seichel could also be seichel the nefesh Bahamis, not necessarily the nefesh kiss.
And sometimes you have to use the seichel of the nefesh habahamis.
So read this book. I'll
Some,
give you words to talk the language.
sometimes you say to a child who's acting badly, say, and this is good for you? This will help your life get better? You're losing all your friends. That's not nefesh halikis, right? That's a selfish interest. But it's an improvement on what's going on. So sometimes you use the seichel of the nefesh habahamis.
You had a line somewhere that we were created against our will, we live against our will, and die against our will. It was also a line that I did a double take on, and it made me wonder, like, what are you really saying there? Like, are you saying that it's a normal, healthy thing to sometimes get this feeling of like, I don't even want to be here? You know, is it an actual conscious against our will, or is it just like, you know, we had no choice, so we're here, so we may as well make the best of it? Like, can you elaborate on the point a little bit?
The initial message is, it's not about you. It's not you're miserable and don't want to be here. No. You're perfectly okay being here. But you're not here because you need to be. In other words, you would be here whether you want to or not. So don't make it about yourself. Right? So it's not meant to be a depressing concept. It's meant to be a liberating concept. This is not your problem. This is not your plan. This is not your need. So relax. Figure out what contribution you can make and make it happily.
How do you know? You touched upon it in the beginning, but I'd love if you could elaborate. How do you know what it is that your contribution is supposed to be? You're pulled in many directions. You're not sure, you know, whether there's the home versus work conflict, or you have a lot of different varied interests, or there's the money versus passion conflict. Like, how do you know what your contribution is supposed to be?
If you're not sure, because you don't have a long-term plan or vision, make a contribution right now where you are, unconditional. Not tomorrow, someplace else, under different circumstances. Now. There's always a contribution you can make now. Okay, it's not a life plan. It's not a policy in life. Make a contribution.
So you weren't necessarily talking about like earth-shattering contributions as much as right now in the situation, how could I help
At least.
serve?
At least. Of course, if you have a good view, if you have a good hashkafa in how you're going to live a life of service, that's wonderful. But if you don't have it, well, then whatever is available.
But then you could spend your whole life not doing any of them because you're not sure which one to do.
Yeah. So you're good moment by moment, but you don't feel like a consistent or
you don't have a direction. Where are you going with this?
Yeah, you don't have a comprehensive plan, but you're doing good.
Hire a business coach to make a 5-year plan with you.
Yeah. I mean, that's people would ask the Rebbe all the time. That's like, where should I go? What shlichus should I take? But, you don't have a Rebbe to tell you that. So you take a hint from Hashgacha Pratis that wherever you were put and wherever you see success and wherever you see a talent, follow it. Take a hint.
Take a hint from Hashkaf Al Yena.
Mhm.
Ask a mashpia, probably a few other things. I just wanted to know if there was anything more that you had to add.
Or friends.
Or friends. Interesting.
Didim mevinim. Somebody called me once to ask about their shlichus. I don't know if I should or I shouldn't, and then the Rebbe says to ask, you didim mevinim. So I said, what makes you think I'm a maven? He says, how do you find a maven? You look it up in the yellow pages? To me, you're a maven. Answer the question. There isn't like a list of mavinim that you can Google.
Right. Okay, so this is on another topic. It was just another question that I had, and it could be you explained it, but I still was wondering when you were discussing about the difference between a boy and a man, you emphasized a number of times the need for a boy to have a male role model to look up to, for somebody to help him, help him get over his demons, you called it, or whatever, be more like the woman, the nothingness. But, I work in a school with girls. I know I have boys, but my job revolves around girls, and just struck me as interesting that in terms of mentorship, you focus on boys. And I kept wondering, why are you not talking about girls and the type of role models they have to have, and who should our girls be looking up to, and for what? Because in the world of influencers today, many of them are just, their role models are who they see on Instagram. So I would love to hear from you a little bit about chinuch habanais and what role models look like for girls.
It's I think the ultimate tragedy that girls today find it so difficult to be girls. It's unheard of. I mean, that's like, like the last hope for mankind was that women are healthy. That girls are now finding it embarrassing or even dangerous to be a girl. This is like sdaim. This is like impossible. It cannot be. But it's the flip side of the fact that today women are much more empowered. Somebody actually said to the Rebbe, and it wasn't just anybody, it was somebody whose opinion you take seriously. She said to the Rebbe, I don't remember all the details, but you'll get the point. The Alter Rebbe took scholars and turned them into Hasidim. The Middle Rebbe took average young men and turned them into Chassidim. He went through all the Rebbeim. He said the Rebbe Rashab was unique. He took teenagers and turned them into Chassidim with Tamchet Mimim. You, she said to the Rebbe, you, for the first time in history, turned women into Chassidim. And the Rebbe was very pleased with that. So in this generation, one of the unique features that never happened before is that women take active and crucial roles in public in bolstering Yiddishkeit and Chassidus, and which never happened before. The flip side of that is the attack against women. Being a woman is like, you have to defend it, you have to justify it, you have to compete with men. It's terrible how uncomfortable girls feel just to be a girl. People say it's the media because you're competing with looks and everybody's worried about their weight and about their complexion and about that's the most visible part of it, but it goes much deeper. So teenagers or even younger children who want to change their gender, it's far more prevalent among girls than among boys. girls are afraid to be girls. That's a tragedy. Because normally, a girl does not need a mashpia, unlike a boy. Because a boy has this ego torment. Am I not?
So you're saying it was intentional that you wrote about male role modeling? It wasn't just that you left out the girls.
No. I mean, now looking back at it, girls need it, unfortunately, girls need it almost as much as boys. But that is so strange. Because naturally, girls should be absolutely secure in their identity. That's the one thing they had never had any doubts about, no insecurities about. Yeah, well, of course, you can compete with other girls. They're prettier, they're smarter, they're more attractive. Okay. But it's all within being a girl. Like, so you can be a 1 or you can be a 10. But you're never resenting being a girl. You can be the best girl, or you can be an ordinary girl. But being a girl was always comfortable. Whereas with boys, being a man is a challenge, does not come natural. But now, for different reasons, now girls need mashpiyim.
So when the Rebbe said Aseh L'charav, though, I mean, we were brought up with the idea of girls getting a mashpia too. That's why it struck me so odd almost to say only boys need a mashpia.
No. There's the role of the mashpia that is purely spiritual. Mm-hmm. Somebody who will inspire you to learn more, daven better, whatever. A girl can use that, of course. But this essential life-saving role of a mentor for a boy should only exist for boys.
Okay. So I'm glad you clarified that.
So at the Beis Chana program with teenagers, we tell them, our goal for these couple of weeks is for you to come home proud to be a Jew and proud to be a girl. I'm not sure which one comes first.
Okay, there was, I guess, this last topic that I just wanted to bring up. I loved where you spoke about the idea of, marriage being about the person rather than the thing, and don't get so stuck on the stuff and focus on the person and on him. It's beautiful. My question is, though, how do you translate that into when you want the thing or when you're frustrated from the thing? Like, you can know in your head that it's about the person, but how do you get to a place that you could let go of needing the thing? And by thing, it could mean anything. It can mean money, help around the house. I'm not referring to something specific. Quality time. When you want something from someone, how do you zero in on the person rather than the thing that you really want?
How do you get your best friend to do something you want? It's never a condition, right? It never sounds like an ultimatum. Do this or our friendship is over. That's distorted. Then the thing is more precious than the friendship. Well, you might as well quit the friendship. If what you want from your spouse is a condition, an ultimatum, right? Unless you give me this, I don't need you at all. Well, then you might as well just get divorced. Because something is more important than your spouse. So I could predict with absolute certainty that you're probably abusing each other in some other ways too. You're taking advantage, you're violating some borders, you're pushing each other beyond whatever. So if in fact you are really married to your spouse, you will find a way to negotiate, to win them over. You'll get what you want. And if not, you'll let it go. It's optional compared to the relationship. And that's the way it has to be. It's almost like whatever I want or need that my spouse cannot give me, then I do without. Because if I can't get it from my spouse, then it's probably not important.
Because Hashem decided it's not important, if that's the fact.
Because if it's not going to be part of our together life, then it's got to go. If it's going to threaten, if it's going to come between us, get it out. Remove it. It's toxic.
Wow.
Same with the Eibishter, We ask the Eibishter for all sorts of things, not only because we want those things, but we want it from him. If it's not coming from him, we don't want it. We don't want something strange that doesn't belong to us. If it's not about us, if it's not you giving me, then it's not good. So when we daven and we ask the Eibishter to give us this, that, or the other, part of what we're saying is we want it only from you. If it's not from you, I don't want it. I mean, imagine a man comes to a married woman and says, if your husband isn't giving you enough money, I'll give you some. No, thank you. I'm not after money. I want to share with my husband. Your money? I don't want your money. So if it's not coming from the Eibishter for me, I don't want it. Because then it's not part of our relationship. And whatever is not part of our relationship does not belong in our house.
Wow. Just before we wrap up, I wanted to clarify something. When I'm around teenagers catch me in everything I say. So I hope I'm saying this in a respectful way for you to clarify. When I was asking you before about how you know about your job or your mission, you said something, and it could be I heard it wrong, that people used to ask the Rebbe, and today we don't have the Rebbe, so therefore look for Hashgacha Pratis. So I think you meant it as in we don't have the Rebbe B'Gashmias, but I just wanted to bring this up because the girls would say, hey, but you always tell us we could have a connection to the Rebbe today, and there is a Rebbe, and he is giving us our Hashpah.
I hope I didn't say that. I didn't say there's no Rebbe. I said you can't ask the Rebbe.
Okay, we'll go back to the recording. My ear heard it, and I wanted to make sure to clarify that.
Yeah. And of course, those people who say, yes, you can ask the Igris, you can ask, okay. But if you don't get an answer, which is certainly possible, besides, the Rebbe told us that for these questions, consult a Refi Yedid. And for this, you ask the Hanhol of the yeshiva. And for another thing, you ask two friends who,
Right,
So the Rebbe is telling us that there are ways of getting answers that he is suggesting, or he's empowering, or whatever.
Wow.
So there are many.
I'm telling you, as I was reading it, I heard your voice reading the book, and now as I was talking it through with you, it's just a totally different experience. So I'm so grateful to you for taking the time to answer the questions and to really clarify these things for me, and just take the Chassidus and the Torah perspective that you brought down in such a relatable manner just to the next level.
If you enjoyed this conversation or this topic, and you're looking for more information, or you want to hear it again from another angle, there is a way to do that. And that is in this book. It's all there. order it from Amazon. You can read it, reread it, and share it. We have a Sunday night program for VIPs that you might be interested in. It's informal, it's questions and answers, it's conversation. It's really relaxed, it's really pleasant, enjoyable, informative, and kind of community-like. It's a Sunday night program. There's a Wednesday morning program for the VIPs, and there's a Wednesday night program. All of it just conversation, casual, laid back, unscripted. So join us, take a look, click the link below and see which of the three suits you best, and join us for some enjoyable conversation.